Hello everybody. Today we are going to talk about one of the very specific and key product of Cashfree, that is payouts. Payout product is primarily used to send a fund from your bank account to your beneficiary's bank account. There are multiple ways you can do payouts. You can either use our dashboard or you can also do the API integration if you are trying to do multiple transfers at the same time. So before I jump into it, let me just go into a demo account which I have created from my ID. So this is a demo account I have created and I am under the payout section. That's what you see on the dashboard. This is a test environment currently, and you can start doing the test transactions within this. I have been given some balance into this account. This is the dashboard that is primarily used for the payouts. Under the beneficiary, I can add any number of beneficiaries under payout product, and I can start sending them funds using the Benny ID itself. Under the transfer, I can see the details of the funds. Cashgram is another useful product where I can send payment link to beneficiaries on their mobile number or email ID, and they can get the money directly into their bank accounts, UPI IDs. Finally, I have the account section, which is my account section, and the fund source is where I can add multiple fund source from which amount will be deducted. This could be first a Cashfree wallet, or I can add my bank account as well. I can add the Paytm, and we have recently introduced the corporate credit card. So now you can also pay using your corporate credit card to any of the beneficiary. Today's video is more about API integration. So this was the dashboard. Now let's jump onto the APIs part. To understand the APIs, you can go through the docs.cashfree.com. Here you can see the list of all the APIs that are present. We are especially talking about Cashfree API. Just click on API documentation, and you can go to the Payouts API. So as of right now, we have divided Payouts API into three different categories: beneficiary API, account API, transfer APIs. Under the beneficiary API, what you can do is basically add beneficiaries, remove beneficiaries, find the Benny ID, and retrieve the beneficiary transfer for a particular Benny. Second is the account API, that is primarily used to the view balance self-transfer, where you transfer the fund to your own payout account, or to the internal transfer the view balance one point. Finally, the transfer API, which will be the most crucial APIs, under which you can use the direct fund transfer, standard fund sync, or in async, or the batch transfer. There are multiple transfer requests you can use. Under the payout postman collection, if you click here, you can download the complete postman collection for the payouts API. Talking about the endpoint, we have production and test environment. Our production endpoints are payout-api.cashfree.com, and the test endpoints are payout.gamma.cashfree.com. Primarily, under this video, we'll be using a test endpoint to understand how to use these APIs, but these are exactly the same APIs, and you can always, once your test environment are completed, you can always use the production endpoints. Our primary identifier for merchant are the app ID and app secrets to understand who is our primary merchant. And finally, for 2FA, we use IP whitelisting. Now let's go to the merchant dashboard, where you can find the ID secret and different ways of IP whitelisting. So this is my merchant dashboard over here. If I click on developer section, I can see there are multiple products available. We are especially talking about the payouts. If I click on the API keys, this is where I come in, and I can simply click on generate APIs, and these are the new set of client ID and client secret I can generate every time. And I have these API keys with me. Now the next aspect is the two-factor authentication. There are two ways I can do the 2FA. First is the IP whitelisting. Second is the public key. To do the IP whitelisting via my 2FA via IP whitelisting, I just need to add my IP address and generate the IP whitelist. I've already done that for my personal ID. If I were to choose another method where I'm using dynamic IPs, then I'll use the public key, and I can generate a new public key. I've already generated, that's why I'm not able to generate it second time. So All I need is delete this one and generate a new public key. This will download a password protected file, and the password will go to your email address, which is registered with this account. As of right now, we'll be using IP whitelisting here. And you can always switch methods between what is the method of 2FA that is being used. Is it IP whitelisting or the public? Now let's go back to the list of the APIs that we are going to talk about. Our first and foremost API is the authentication API, which is primarily used to authenticate your account. We already talked about the client. How can you get the client ID and client secret? The response 204 and 401, which is when you have the correct client ID and client secret, and you have already whitelisted your API and you're using your same account. So this is our authentication API. So first and foremost API is the authorization API. Here you will pass the client ID and client secret along with one of the ways of 2FA. Here, let's say if my IP is already whitelisted, and the result is that you will get an authorization token. Now this authorization token has to be passed in all the rest of the APIs, the Beni API, transfer API, account API in the header part. So this is the primary my authorization API. Next is the Beni APIs, where you will be doing the Beni addition, getting the Beni ID, removing the beneficiary, or getting the beneficiary history. First and foremost is adding a beneficiary. It's a fairly simple API where you will pass on the details of a particular beneficiary along with the Beni ID, name, the email ID, phone number, bank account details, IFSC, BP, and so on. And the result is that subcode 200, where the Beni ID has been generated successfully. Now take an example that I am a company who has 100+ employees, and I want to do salary disbursement to these 100 employees. Now, since I am passing the Beni ID and I already have these 100+ employees in my system, and let's say they have their own employee ID, I just for the sake of easy understanding of the code level, I'll be passing employee ID as a unique identifier for the Beni ID, and we'll be saving message. Just an example, it can be anything, but if I were in a company, then I would have been passing my employee ID here. And this Beni ID is a unique identifier for the merchant. Now to get the beneficiary details, you just need to pass the Beni ID, and you'll get the rest of the Beni details. Example, here I pass on the Beni ID and I got the details of the beneficiary. If I forget the Beni ID, I can always pass the bank account details and IFSC, and the Beni ID will be returned. Yeah. Finally, if I want to remove the beneficiary from the Beni list that have been added, I'll use this API where I'll pass the Beni ID and it will be removed from my Beni list. To get the beneficiary history, I simply need to pass the Beni ID and start it, and it is optional. If not, then we'll provide the complete full list of the Beni history. Now let's go back to the merchant dashboard to understand where the Benis are getting added. So if I go to the payout section and the beneficiary, this is the list of the Benis that have been added. So you can either add the Beni manually, or you can use our APIs to add the beneficiary, remove the beneficiary, get the beneficiary ID details, and so on. So now let's come to the most important APIs of the payouts, which is a transfer API. I'll be talking about the transfer APIs version 1.2, which are different from transfer API. Here we have added a payment instrument ID in 1.2. So now if you attempt to transfer, you will also need to provide the payment instrument ID, which is nothing but a fund source ID from the account from which funds need to be deducted. We have multiple transfer APIs in our system: standard transfer sync, standard transfer async, direct transfer, and finally the batch transfer. The primary difference between them can be understood via this graph. So let's say I have an amount which I need to transfer. If I don't want to add the beneficiary into my system, or I don't have the beneficiary added, I'll use the direct transfer API. If the beneficiary has already been added into my system and I want to do multiple transfer, let's say I don't want to do a multiple Beni transfer, then I'll use the transfer is sync API. Let's say if I want to do a multiple beneficiary transfer, but these I want to do one single API call. So I'll use the batch transfer API and I'll pass on the information of all these 50, 100,000 beneficiaries in one single API call. Let's say I want to do multiple API call and for each transfer, and I have an upper limit of 1,000 transactions per minute. So if I want to do till 1,000 transactions per minute, then you go ahead with transfer sync API, where the number of transactions per minute are less than 100, less than 1,000. And if the transactions are more than 1,000 per minute, then we'll suggest to go with the transfer async API. There's not much of a difference between transfer sync and transfer sync async API. We'll talk a little bit about what exactly is the difference later. So now let's first understand the transfer sync API. So under the transfer sync API, we do a transfer ASAP. So transfer is immediately right then and there, and the bank reference number is returned in the API response. A typical median time for the response is 2 to 5 seconds. So think of this like this, how the async and sync transfer different is. Under a async transfer, your transfer is queued, while in a sync transfer, your transfer is attempted right then and there without a delay. So we trigger the transfer as soon as possible. The APIs get hit. The details of this body params are the Benny ID that has been created along with the amount, the transfer ID. Transfer ID is a unique alphanumeric number which you will send from your end. The transfer mode, these could be the bank transfer, UPI, Paytm, Amazon Pay. Payment instrument ID is the fund source ID which we talked about, from which the amount will be deducted. Finally, the remarks part, how the success looks like. So the success is the transfer has been completed and the reference ID along with the UTI number has been generated. So this is the transfer sync. Transfer async in terms of parameters is very similar. It's just the approach it takes is different. Here, the transfer is queued into the Cashfree. We return the Cashfree verifies the request and return the Cashfree reference ID ASAP. Now the transfer is attempted within the first 60 seconds, and then you can query the latest status of the transfer. So that since the transfer is queued within the Cashfree and the API response is much faster for the async transfer API as compared to the sync. So like shown here, async transfer response is less than 100 milliseconds compared to the sync transfer, which takes 2 to 5 seconds, because sync transfer attempted right then and there, and we wait for the bank to respond. That's why async APIs can handle more transactions per minute, and that's why when you're doing more than 1,000 transactions per minute, we suggest to use transfer async API, the high success rate. We already discussed the parameter, the Benny ID, which is already been created, amount, the transfer ID, which is a unique identifier for the transfer mode. Payment instrument ID is the fund source ID from which amount is deducted, and the remarks. How the success looks is the transfer has been initiated, and this is the Cashfree's unique reference ID that is returned. Now let's come to the direct transfer API, which is primarily used when you don't have added any of the benefit details into the Cashfree system. The primary difference is the benefits object, where you need to pass the benefit details. Amount, transfer ID, transfer mode remains the same. The available transfer mode here are the bank transfer, UPI, Paytm, Amazon Pay, IMPS, and NEFT. Another bank details, the bank details object. Let's say if I am doing a bank transfer, then I'll be passing the bank account number, IFSC code, name, phone number, email, and address are required in all the cases. If I'm doing a UPI transfer, Paytm, Amazon Pay, or the bank transfer. If I'm doing a UPI transfer, then instead of the bank account and IFSC, I'll be passing the VPA. Now let's come to the final, the batch transfer API. If I need to do fund transfer to 1,000 of beneficiaries in a single API, I'll be passing the array of the objects of all the beneficiaries I want to do the fund transfer. The available format or available transfer here are the the UPI, Paytm, Amazon Pay, or the bank account. And if I have the beneficiary ID, then a list of the beneficiary ID. Let's say if there is a conflict in the Benny which is already present in the system, and I want to override with the new Benny ID which I am passing, then I'll set this flag as true. And just like this example, I'll keep on adding the Benny object here. 1 second. The response is the reference ID, the Cashfree's unique reference ID that will be generated. Now let's come finally to the get transfer status, which is used to get the latest status of the transfer based on the transfer ID or the Cashfree's unique reference ID, which came as a response. It gives me the details of a transfer, if it is successfully completed, or if it is in a pending state, or if it is transfer is failed. And finally, transfer if the transfer is rejected as well, and a transfer reversed. So these are all the available cases of get transfer status. So I'll take a quick pause here and why the transfer got rejected or got reversed. So when we receive a transfer, we pass the transfer to the Benny bank, and let's say the bank account does not exist or there's an invalid bank account. Then in those scenarios, our transfer get rejected or the transfer get reversed. So those are the primary cases. There this happens. Otherwise, most of the cases transfer goes into successful status if the Benny details are in correct format and they are the correct values, and Benny exists in the bank account. Next is the get batch transfer status, which is used to get the transfer status of the batch transfer API. Here you just need to pass the transfer ID and you get the latest status of the batch transfer for each individual transfer that you did. So let's say there were 2 transfers available, then I'll get the transfer status for each of the individual Benny transfer which I have done via batch transfer API. After the beneficiary APIs, we have the account basis specific APIs. I'll be directly jumping to get balance 1.2, which is the next set of API that need to be used. Under the get balance API, before I jump in, let's go back to the merchant dashboard and try to understand the concept of fund source. So this is one of the payout account which I have. Under this payout account, I can have this is my current fund source, which is the Cashfree wallet. I can add another fund source, which is my bank account. I can fill in the information. I can add another fund source as a corporate credit card. So I'll have Cashfree wallet as a fund source. I will have, let's say, ICICI bank account as a fund source, or I will have the Paytm wallet as a fund source. Each of the fund source will have its own unique fund source ID that is something like this. Now each of the fund source not just have a unique ID, but their own available balance, their own other limits. For example, let's say if I connect my ICICI account, then whatever funds that I hold in my ICICI current account will be the available balance. And when I am doing a transfer, if I choose Cashfree wallet as my fund source, then amount will be deducted from this account only. If I choose ICICI account as my fund source, then amount will be deducted from my ICICI account. If I choose Paytm wallet as my fund source, then Paytm wallet amount will be deducted. Similarly for the corporate credit card. Now let's get back to the get balance 1.2. So let's say I want to know what's my current available balance in my one of the payout account. Now within the payout account, I will have multiple fund sources available. To know what's the balance, I need to specify which pay instrument or which fund source I'm talking about. That's why I'll need to pass the fund source ID here. To get the fund source ID, like what I just explained, it's right here. So I need to pass this fund source ID to get the latest available balance for this particular fund source. And rest remains the same. Next is self withdrawal. So if I want to do a self withdrawal into my basically transfer the funds to my own account, I will use this API, and we currently allow maximum 3 self withdrawal on a daily basis. I mean, it's fairly simple. You just need to pass on the withdrawal ID, which is a unique identifier, along with the amount that you are planning to transfer, along with the remarks. interest transfer is very similar to self-withdrawal, but here if you have multiple payout accounts available, then you also pass the recharge account information, which can be alphanumeric.